We'll call the meeting to order at 6:35. First thing on the agenda is to approve the minutes from the regular meeting held on June 12th, 2018.
So moved.
Second?
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Next on the item is actually two in one. Discuss the biweekly payroll and the Deep River Elementary School budget. Both of these things are going to go, they're kind of, one, we need to talk about with the Board of Finance, and the other is just information. The biweekly payroll, as you know, we went to that last year. We went to, all the town is paid biweekly. We saved 50% on the cost of doing payroll. And it doesn't, that's not really an accurate representation of what we're talking about, because this has been happening for many years. When the year ends, when the fiscal year ends beyond
The pay period.
the pay period, it should be accounted for and accrued. We should, when we prepare the budget, we should be preparing the budget to include that cost. That has never been done. So over the years, our auditors and stuff, it's not a substantial amount of money, so they don't really, never gets caught by the auditors, or they don't really make an issue of it. But it's just something that just continues. With biweekly, it's a little bit bigger of a number. While it doesn't actually impact, nobody's getting paid anymore, nobody's making any more, it's just because of the way the year falls, we'll have a week, our next pay period will include a week from the last week of June and a day in July.
Usually you make it up the following year, don't you?
Well, that's what you would think, but no, you don't, because it just continues to go. Like last year was the first time I had heard of this. Kathy just took the money from this year and used it to pay for last year.
We're still gonna have 26 pay periods.
That's right. Although in 2019, we're going to have 27, because every 12 years you have 27 pay periods.
Yeah.
But in this next year, you're still gonna have 26, you're gonna have 26, you're gonna have 26. It always works out, but it's money that was not budgeted for that has to get paid. And the auditors can probably explain it better than I can. But what we can do this year is we're gonna ask the Board of Finance to encumber money so that it doesn't happen so it becomes a one-time event. It will continue to happen, but the money will be budgeted properly, and it won't be taken from the following year to pay for the last year. So we're going to encumber the 2017-18 budget with the cost of a week's pay to everybody, and use the surplus from that to pay that, so that 2018-19 budget will start off at even Steven, where it should start off, and it will go and continue to do that. If we have any questions, I want to explain that and hopefully do a better job to the Board of Finance, but the auditors are visiting tonight, so they'll also be able to explain things. It's really just a matter of, it just had started who knows how many years ago, and just never got, rather than encumber the budget, it was easier just to go forward. I personally think, and Bud agrees, that we should start each year
At zero.
at zero.
Oh, yeah. Much better.
So we'll do that this year, and hopefully won't have to worry about it again. Deep River Elementary School budget, if you remember, we've been talking about, they had a special ed student that came in halfway through the year, was going to cost us an additional $85,000. So they went into a freeze, and were able to whittle that down to about $25,000. I think I told you guys told everybody last meeting about the gas meter that was being read incorrectly. So that added another $16,000 to the
Ouch.
monies that they were in the hole. So I called Ruth last week, or texted Ruth last week, just to see where they were at. If they were gonna come, they should come to this meeting, to the Board of Finance, and ask for, if they were gonna ask for money, they should come. And somehow or another,
They found the money.
they found the money, and they're at zero.
It's amazing.
So,
Thank you for finding it.
that's great. I mean, you know what? According to Ruth, there was just a lot of scrimping, and the teachers did a lot without an awful lot of what they needed. And, you know, if that's, I gotta believe that's the case, and if that's the case, then thank you very much to the teachers and the school
Good
for
job.
doing that,
Good
because
job.
it saves Deep River having to go into our reserve fund, which we've been working to try to keep stable, so. I'll also give that information to the Board of Finance tonight, just because it's been a part of the conversation. So there's no action on that, although I think the Board of Finance will be moving it to another special town meeting, probably at their next meeting, in order to encumber that. And also another thing that I can explain to you during the other business. So we'll have to do some just budget stuff. It's not spending any money, it's just putting money where it belongs. Item 4 is to discuss emergency operations. We participated in a drill like we do every year with Eversource and the State of Connecticut Emergency Operations Center. So just they take a disaster scenario and run through that with all the towns, EOCs open, and just to make sure that communications are all working and all that kind of thing, protocols all taken care of. In doing that, in preparing for that, I recognized that the Deep River emergency team is really pretty short-handed. If you look through this, we're at about 50% of all the roles that need to be taken over. So I contacted everyone, and that's on the roster, including folks like Rich Forrestal, who have retired from this, and Keith Nelson, who was both of whom were actually directors for a little while, to come in and to help us reorganize and reactivate.
Good.
So we're working on that right now. We've got this is really just the operations plan for the town of Deep River. It was revised in 2016. We're going to go through this again, make sure that it's still current. And so we will be reaching out for people to participate. I think you suggested you'd be interested, and that'd be terrific. If you're interested, it's great. It really just boils down to, most of what it is directing communication between the state, the utilities, and our emergency personnel, like the fire department, the ambulance groups, and the town crew. So there just needs to be a good foundation of communication between everybody during these things, and connected to the state. So as this moves forward, this really just came up. We threw it on the agenda at the end, just so that we can repopulate it, because all these folks have decided they don't want to participate, or they moved out of town, or they died. So it just never got repopulated. So
I'll help out too also.
yeah, Jerry Clark is still
Yeah.
doing this, and he's great in the summer. But he mentioned last year that he kind of wanted to, and it makes practical sense because he is not in town for half the year.
For the winter.
I mean, during the winter storms, he would call and we'd do all this stuff. But he should be here, or whoever the director is should be here. So we've got some thoughts. I've got some thoughts on who. And Gina really has already volunteered, and there's a good part of that makes a lot of sense because she's here already anyway.
Oh, yeah.
During the winter storm, she and I spent the day here or at the EOC, just fielding phone calls and communicating. So there is some sense to that.
Yep.
Where is the EOC?
Right now, it's housed officially at the old ambulance, but practically at the firehouse.
Okay, that's what I thought.
There's a lot of sense to having it at the firehouse, but there's also arguments from old directors that maybe it should not be at the firehouse. just because of, the activity. You want to have the EOC group able to be isolated so they can communicate with whoever they need to communicate. So that's why we're getting the older folks together, the older members together, so that we can, how did it work best? How will it work better going forward? So that's, again, nothing to act on, although I think probably in the next month we will work really hard to have this set up again and filled. So we'll keep you guys posted, and if you guys are both involved, and anyone else who's interested in participating. In fact, Gina and I are going to a COST, the Council of Small Towns is having an emergency operations meeting tomorrow up at the wedding facility that you have. Aquaturf.
Oh, yeah.
So tomorrow morning we'll be up there talking with all the other towns and COST about legal responsibilities and things like that. So it couldn't have been better timing as far as that goes. The next item on the agenda is any business to come before the board. So, are there any questions? Any concerns?
A curiosity, was there a public hearing last week about adding 40 parking places to a location?
Planning and zoning had a public hearing.
I was asked about that's
Yep.
why, yeah.
Planning and zoning had a public hearing. There's an application made by the Essex Steam Train. That's actually in front of the next public meeting will be in front of the Inland Wetlands Commission. I'm not sure that that's a public hearing. That's just a regular meeting. So there's not a whole opportunity for public to speak out. They would probably, well, it depends on whether they make that decide it's a significant activity or not. I don't think it's 40 spaces. I think it's a little less. It's somewhere between 35 and 40 spaces.
Yeah,
I don't
yeah.
remember. Where there's already a parking lot. It's just not a finished parking lot. It's just to the south of the railroad house, the station.
Okay. I know where that is. Okay.
There was a lot of concern. The meeting moved upstairs because there was so much concern from the neighbors, property owners down there about increased traffic. It's one of those things where it might benefit the town. People driving into town and decide that going down there to take a boat ride, they might decide that it looks like a nice place to come back to. But that's pretty esoteric and hard to say that's concrete that it's going to benefit the town.
Did they say the reasoning why they need the parking spots?
Yeah, they want to continue to run the riverboat, but they're finding an increasing demand for smaller parties, where it's not economically feasible for them to hire the train to come up from Essex to come up here for 65 people or 100 people, whatever the number is.
Yeah.
I think it was 100. The crowd was bantering 100, 200, whatever. I think whatever the number it would be for 40 cars, so it'd be somewhere around 180 or 100 people. For that, it's not feasible for them to take the train, so they want people to be able to drive to the landing, get on the boat, take the ride, and then leave. We'll see. The crowd that came out was pretty against, but that doesn't mean that it's not a referendum. The zoning regulations are voted on by the town, and then it's up to the Planning and Zoning Commission to make sure that the application adheres to that. If this fits the zoning regulations, then they need to do it. Now, they do have the ability not to just say you can do it whenever you want to. They can say you can do it Monday through Thursday. I mean, what I would love to see is for them to regulate the hours of operation from Monday to Thursday, and then open that parking lot to the public for additional parking for the landing on the weekends, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And I think that that does give a little benefit to town members. It still have to have a permit. It'd still be for Deep River residents, not for out-of-towners, but it would create additional space for folks to park their boat trailers and their cars and be at the landing.
Sure.
But that hasn't been, that's up to the Planning and Zoning Commission to put restrictions like that on it, and it's up to the applicant to decide whether they want to do that.
The space that's currently there now, is that enough, or do they have to excavate and
Oh.
cut more trees down?
There will be some excavation. They won't cut any trees down,
Okay.
but they will have to clear. The property is clear. It just is not. There's only gravel on, I think, about 50% of where they want to be. It's pretty big.
Yeah.
It's long.
I can
It's
visualize.
long
I
and
just
narrow.
didn't-
If you
I didn't know
think,
if they had to
Yeah.
yeah.
make it wider.
No, the wetlands is such that they really, and Gateway Commission, all that kind of stuff. It's not an opportunity for them to cut and
Okay.
clear.
So
But it
property's
is,
already-
it is big.
The property's already there, it's just
Yeah,
moving material around it and paving it.
they're not gonna pave it.
Oh,
It's
not
gonna
gonna
be
pave it.
gravel.
Okay.
It's going to be, there will be a fence between the parking lot and the tracks. There will be some lighting. One of the members of the audience asked, and that would be up to the zoning commission to require that they keep the lighting either motion activated or just on during hours of operation. Although you never know, with something like that, you probably should have lighting on it, so keep kids from people from hanging out there.
Yep.
There is, you might remember, we were talking with Dave about continuing to work with DEP towards finding some monies for a walkway
A walkway.
that goes from the landing down to, at least to Essex Street, but maybe the first stage would be down to the marina. So that parking would probably create some space for that, if that was to move forward. So, there are positives that I can find, but there are, it will increase traffic. I don't know that it'll increase it to where it's dangerous, but yeah, talk to the folks out there, it sure does.
But it's a tough question to ask, how often would they have these smaller parties, so to speak? No one,
You don't know.
you don't
Yeah,
know.
it's a crapshoot.
It could be once a week, could be once a month, it could be 4 times a week if that's what they restrict it to.
Right.
That's why I think they should put restrictions on it.
I guess my question should have been, do they see an overwhelming demand right now, that's why they're pushing forward at it?
Well, they must see an increased demand, because this has been in the works, they say, for 4 or 5 years.
Wow.
So there must be an increase, because they're spending on engineering now, they're prepared to spend the money on it. There is some improvements to the local infrastructure. They want to continue the sidewalk across the parking lot and across their property, so that'll keep people off the road there. And there is a drainage situation that since the sewer project, the paving has changed enough to where the water is kind of, when it rains and when it snows and it's melting, is sheeting across River Street on that corner. So it kind of it freezes up where it's not draining properly. So they've proposed a couple of catch basins, which should alleviate that problem.
Yeah.
So, it's a good observation of New England government. The people came out, and a lot of them said their word, or said their piece, and that was continued to next month. So I think you'll see another public hearing and another crowd will be down here. But, whether it's good or bad, I can't say for sure. There's nothing concrete that says this is gonna really benefit Deep River. They pay property taxes on the materials inside the shack, but we don't get any real tax money. This won't increase property taxes. But it will,
Increased
it
traffic.
might bring a few people to town.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Might
it's
not.
possible.
Probably not coincidentally, they've proposed to shuttle people from Essex for the muster. So I just heard from them today, and I wasn't able to connect, but they want people to park in Essex, take the train to Deep River. They'll have a shuttle to bring them up to the elementary school so that they can, enjoy the muster, and then they'll shuttle them back down to the train afterwards and bring them home back to Essex. which
Interesting.
could really, you know, if you remember Facebook last year, there was an awful lot of bad blood with parking,
Yeah.
Yeah,
you know, on Main Street. So, you know, maybe they're trying to participate a little more in Deep River, contribute a little more. I don't know. I can't say. They've not
Interesting.
really done much in Deep River that I've seen in my 15 years. But so does that answer that? Probably,
Absolutely.
Probably more than you needed.
Yeah, thank you very
John,
much.
you had your hand up.
Yeah, on this emergency group that you're, how many volunteers do you think you're looking for?
The existing group for it, and this is laid out by the state, has 11 people.
Okay.
And you have half of that now?
We have 6 right now.
So what kind of people are you looking for, with particular
Well-
expertise?
Yeah, and I'm really not particularly good communication skills, good ability to be at the emergency operations center during the emergency as opposed to home or things like that. I'm really just going through this, finding out what the description of these roles are. I don't really know. I've only dealt with in the, I don't even want to call them emergencies, but in the situations that have arisen since I've been here, it was a couple of blizzards and a big rainstorm. The only people that I've dealt with is Jerry Clark, the fire department. You know, Steve Bundy and Jim Budney are both part of this already, so they were participating. And Dale Winchell is also assistant director. So you know, those are the only people that have really been involved. But you know, like I said, the fire department is already there. The ambulance is already there. Is already on call and communicating. So I think a lot of this is more just making sure, you know, Steve David is our weather reports guy. You know, so he pays attention to the weather. You know, lets us know what, but it's such now that the state sends that out every 20 minutes, every half hour, depending on the stuff anyway. So it's important that it be populated, and it's important that it be active, but in that, you know, I think you could talk to the folks about during the hurricanes, about how important it was, you know, when the town was shut down for 5 days and stuff like that. That's probably when it becomes more important.
Have we got an electronic copy of this?
I do
mammoth
not.
document? Okay. No big.
I was surprised to find it.
Dwayne's been hiding.
Anything else? Expertise is mostly, I think, interest. I can tell you the jobs, I can't tell you what they are. But the
Yeah.
director, the administrator, assistant operations, security, communication. So I guess you'd want to be good on the radio there. Operations, weather reports, transportation, hazmat, medical needs. Those are the 11 people. So.
Cool.
As I decipher what the job descriptions are, I'll go for them.
Thank you. Let's do this.
Yep, just a quick FYI, I know you guys are ready to go, but I still have a couple minutes. Roads are being paved, we're doing the Industrial Park Road right now. We just did the south end of River Road and Rockaway Ferry. In line to be done is Riverview? Yeah, Riverview up here. And Melody Lane also was up there today. That really is in desperate need of paving.
Just paving or mill and pave?
Mill and pave. That's gonna be difficult. There's a really
There's a
lousy road been there. There's a lot of rock. That's gonna be a tough road. And then, as money's settled down and we get settled into next year, we'll probably do one or two more in the fall.
Good.
But we've got a lot of patching to do, and we've got a lot of curbing to do, so that it's gonna cut into how much paving we can do.
And I haven't heard back from Peter Cochran yet. I'm gonna have to try and reach him. He stopped me on the street a week or two ago when I was out walking, and he wanted to make time to talk about a traffic incident, speeding on West Bridge. It almost endangered his son getting ready to go to school or walking to the bus stop. So he said he'd get in touch, but I guess. he
Yeah,
couldn't.
we've been talking with Dawn, and the guys have been active up there trying to slow people down.
Yeah.
They really have not found that people are speeding when they're out there. They haven't issued just a couple of tickets, but mostly warnings for people that are just going a little bit too fast.
Yeah.
We haven't found it. We're gonna put the,
You get that one guy that comes flying through there, like you
that's all it
said.
takes.
The
Yeah,
motorcycle.
yeah, that's all it
Yeah.
takes. And that's all it takes for somebody to get hurt.
That's right.
So.
Yeah.
But that is also on the list to be paved. But I want to talk with some state transportation folks, because I think if we pave it and keep it as wide as it is, it's just going to encourage
More
people to
runway.
speed up. So maybe we can narrow that street a little bit and
That or a
slow
speed
some
bump.
folk down.
Yeah.
Yeah, speed bumps are just going to get wrecked.
Yeah, that's
They
true.
just don't make sense
That's
in a
Yeah.
major road. You know, a small seasonal road or something like that, maybe. As much as they're the first thing we think
Booby
about.
trap it. Have a big
Okay.
covered ditch.
So if there's nothing else to talk about, we can make a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn?
Second is.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay,
Okay.
thanks. I'll call the meeting to order.
Okay, we need
And,
a town meeting moderator. I guess that's me.
Nope, we need to
We need to
move
appoint-
to appoint you.
Okay.
And I think we can do that either through a
I'll
nomination.
make a motion to nominate Bill Burke to be the moderator.
Okay, can I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right.
Bill, you're the moderator.
All right, thank you, sir. And let's see, could the clerk please read the call of the meeting?
First, you need to appoint me as clerk of the meeting.
I'm sorry, thank you for reminding me. Okay, make a motion that we appoint Amy as the,
It- I'm
Go
sorry,
ahead.
it doesn't need to be a motion. You as the moderator can just
Yep,
appoint me as
just appoint.
clerk and ask
Sorry.
for
So
the
appointed.
call. Thanks. I will read the call.
please.
This is Town of Deep River legal notice. Attention residents of Deep River. Notice is hereby given that the Board of Selectmen will hold a special town meeting on Tuesday, June 26, 2018, at 7 p.m. in the Deep River Town Hall, 174 Main Street, Deep River, Connecticut, to approve actions of the Board of Selectmen at their regular meeting of June 12, 2018. 1. Tax credit for Deep River Housing Authority and Deep River Congregational Church Neighborhood Assistance Act. 1 of 1, programs that shall be included on a list pursuant to Chapter 228A of the Connecticut General Statutes Neighborhood Assistance Act prior to submission of such list to the State of Connecticut Department of Revenue Services. And 2, interested persons are invited to attend and be heard. Written communications will be received. This notice is published pursuant to state statutes. This notice was dated in Deep River, Connecticut on Wednesday, June 13th, 2018.
Thank you, Amy. All right, let's see here. We are here, all right. Make a motion, we adopt the call of the meeting as the call for this meeting.
Okay, so I'll move that the.
Accept the call.
To accept the
The
call.
call,
Second.
seconded, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. All right, motion to approve item
That's it,
one.
yeah.
That's done.
No, we have to actually do that. Now we have to approve, we get a motion to approve the item.
Thank you. Okay, we need a motion to approve
This
item
will be
one.
just the one item.
Okay, so we have a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve item number 1.
Okay, seconded? All in favor?
Well, wait,
Wait,
let's get a second. I thought that young fellow over there.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'll second it.
Okay, all in favor?
Well, wait, now's the time for discussion. So we can answer any questions, we can open up the floor for conversation, or we can just have this explained if you would like to explain again what's
Do
happening.
we have any discussion?
Yes.
Allison.
Go ahead.
Would you like me to?
If you would like to, yeah.
I'm stumbling a bit the first time.
Okay, first time through, man.
It's very complicated.
We've participated, the Congregational Church of Deep River has participated in the Neighborhood Assistance Act for a few years now. And we're a nonprofit central institution of the town, not only fulfilling conventional church functions, but also serving as basically a local community center, which is actively used 6 days a week, year-round. by various groups from the shoreline area. So free community suppers every Thursday with the Shoreline Soup Kitchen and Food Pantry. And then a variety of groups ranging from Alcoholics Anonymous to Guiding Eyes for the Blind Puppy Training, Transitions Academy, National Theater of the Deaf, Eating Disorders Anonymous, Girl Scouts, Boy Scout troop meetings. Sometimes we even have 2 meetings going on at the same time. So the church is actively used, and we want to keep it up so that we can maintain that as a resource for the people in the area. What we're looking for with the Neighborhood Assistance Act is energy efficiencies to reduce energy costs and keep the building solid. We're looking this year to replace 70-plus-year-old entry doors with Energy Star rated entry doors to eliminate drafts, reduce energy consumption, install low-flow energy efficient fixtures. We have 8 community bathrooms and 2 kitchens, and complete the installation of energy efficient cooling systems and lighting utility upgrades. The total cost of all of that is estimated at $33,170. So we'll get what we can, and if we don't get it all this year, we'll continue with next year and try to raise in between.
Great.
That's what we're looking for.
Thank you for the explanation.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions?
I'll speak briefly for the Deep River Housing Authority, and that's really just the same. They want to just continue the same thing. They're going to use some of this money towards replacement of some parts of windows and things like that with more efficient, energy efficient construction. You know, they did just finish that renovation, but the part of that, this will work towards the older building. You know, they have to do some air conditioning up there. I think they have to do some. I'm not sure that this. I don't think this will go towards the elevator. I think that was a little too high of a cost, but. But they've also benefited from this for about the same amount of time that the church
we
has.
started
That's a
the
good
same
concept.
year.
Yeah.
Okay.
And again, just to point out to everyone, this does not cost the town any time, any materials, anything. This is completely monitored by the two applicants.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Do we have any other comments, questions? We need to go to vote. All right. All right. Then I would make a motion that we.
Nope, just go to vote. Call for
All right.
all those in favor.
Then all in favor of what's been discussed in this proposal, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay. No opposition? So moved.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you for your support.
Yep, thank you for all your work. And thanks for coming in. It's good to have someone here to explain it better than I can.
And me.
Now, this is a special meeting, so we can't call for any other business.
No.
So we just go
No.
straight to the motion to adjourn.
Okay, and I need a motion to adjourn this public hearing.
Make a motion to adjourn?
Okay, seconded.
Second by Jim.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay.
Good evening. This is the regular June meeting of the Finance Board of the Town of Deep River. The first item on our agenda would be the homework of approving the minutes from the April. Do you have a date on the April?
I just always say April. April 24th.
April's fine. We only had one meeting, so
Yeah, April 24th.
April. And we should also approve the minutes of the special meeting on May 7th, right? And then our May 20.
No, special meeting on May 21.
Okay, good.
2 specials.
Oh, 2 specials, good. All right. Could I have a motion? Does anyone forget? Laurie could give you a brief summary of what went on at those meetings, but anything you want to say? Anyone remember what we talked about?
I'll make a motion that we accept minutes from both meetings.
All 3?
All in favor?
Okay, all
All
three.
right, sound like a deal. All right, we're on our way. Audience and citizens or public notice would be.
Vote on that?
We just did, didn't we?
You made a motion. It
I
has to be
made a
seconded.
All in favor? Okay.
Aye.
All right,
Okay.
all right, it's done. Cool. Next item on our agenda would be something that would encourage our auditors to speak to us, okay? I will do the Jennifer M. Hawkins, CPA and MSA, who is partner and public service practice co-leader, and she will take it from here, okay? A few of us have titles, that's why I think you should celebrate them. Go for it.
Well, good afternoon, good evening. I am Jennifer Hawkins. I was one of the audit partners that served on your audit for Deep River. With me tonight, I also have Michael Van Deventer. He also served as a partner. Typically, one of us is partner, and the other one's a current partner in every governmental engagement we have, and there's a good reason for that, because if one of us is not available, the other one steps in, and I got to test that out this audit, because just before your audit was issued, I actually was out on maternity leave. So Mike actually stepped in to help us with issuing the audit. I was, still familiar with a lot of the issues that were going on and from behind the scenes, if you will. But also tonight, I have Lauren Blair, who also served as your audit engagement as your audit senior. And she was involved in the day-to-day here and assisted with the preparation of financial statements. So everyone tonight should have 3 things in front of them. I believe you have a full set of financial statements. You also have a single audit report, but then you also have the PowerPoint presentation. That presentation actually is the highlight of all the information in the bound documents, so we're going to concentrate on that so we can, kind of hit those highlights of those financial statements. We don't have to, go through those in detail. But if you looked at the financial statements and you have questions, feel free to let us know. And really, my job here tonight is to cover the scope of our work, the audit reports that we issued. I will cover some financial highlights. There will be some required communications that I need to make to the board in connection with our audit, and then, of course, if you have any questions. In terms of the scope of our work, every year when we come to do an audit, or even here at Deep River, we're really here to do 3 things. The first being the audit of the financial statements, which you all are know and familiar with. And we perform our audit in accordance with the auditing standards issued by the AICPA, or American Institute of Certified Public Accountants, as well as because you are a municipality, we're required to follow government auditing standards, and those are issued by the U.S. Government Accountability Office. Because of the level of state and federal financial assistance that Deep River receives in terms of its grants, we are required to perform a federal and state single audit. The federal audit is conducted in accordance with the Uniform Administrative Requirements, those cost principles and audit requirements for federal awards, also known as uniform guidance, if those of you may have heard of that term. And that's for any funding that Deep River receives in greater than $750,000. So anytime you have federal dollars received in excess of $750,000 or more, you're required to have a federal single audit.
Is it incrementally this year we had to have that, or the fact that over some period of time we have received that?
This year you have to have it, so you have to expend $750,000 in 1 year. So if you have say you got 1 grant and you spend $250,000 this year, $250,000 next year, $250,000 the year after, you wouldn't have a federal single audit. You have to expend the dollars in 1 year. And then related to that, the state of Connecticut also has a similar rule where if you receive and expend more than $300,000 in state funding, you're required to have a state single audit. And the state issues their own OPM compliance supplement, which is based on the actual Connecticut State Single Audit Act. And then also, in terms of our supplements that we're required to follow, we also do look at applicable grant and contract agreements in order to conduct our federal state single audit. And the third thing is the state of Connecticut Department of Ed requires an agreed upon procedure report, also known as Form ED-001, be reviewed in accordance with required Department of Ed procedures. We have performed that review and also have issued a report based on that. That actually is not an audit, it's what they call agreed upon procedures, because the state actually hands out specific procedures they want us to perform and check certain things. So that has been performed as well. In terms of our audit report, our report on the financial statements, Deep River is receiving an unmodified clean opinion on the financial statements. And in terms of a governmental entity, the opinions actually broke up into the following opinion units. The first being the governmental activities. This is the activities of the town on a full accrual basis, much like you would see in a commercial entity. All your assets and all your liabilities are recorded here. Full accrual, meaning all your receivables, all your capital assets, your property, plant, and equipment, as well as all the debt issued to acquire those items. Also, your business type activities, that the Deep River Sewer Fund, that's also considered an opinion unit or a major type fund. And then the major governmental funds we audited as well, that would be the general fund and capital project funds. And then anything that doesn't fall into those above categories gets lumped together in what we call the aggregate remaining fund information. And it just determines how we look and audit each area of the financial statements. Now, you are receiving an unmodified clean opinion on the financial statements. That's the highest level of reporting you could receive. But I want to remind you that while that is the highest level of opinion you can receive, our opinion provides reasonable assurance that your financial statements are free from misstatement, but not absolute. And that's because we're required to follow a risk-based approach and use risk-based auditing standards. To get absolute assurance, we'd have to audit every single transaction 100%, and that would be very time-consuming and very costly. So while it is reasonable, it's not absolute. I always like to point that out to my board. The other report that's issued in relation to the audit report is report on compliance and internal control over financial reporting. This is basically we need to gain an understanding of internal control over the town's financial processes. It's not an opinion, but rather that we do have to consider compliance with laws, regulations, and the processes in place to process the town's transactions. And if we find anything, we're required to report that to you. We have no material non-compliance of laws and regulations, and we have no material weaknesses over financial reporting. We did, however, report a significant deficiency over internal control over financial reporting. This is similar to the deficiency that you've received in the past. It's mainly related to the number of entries that are required to be made in order to prepare your financial statements in accordance with the full governmental GAAP. And basically, we just recommend that the town, continues to work to develop a more formal closing process. The idea is that over time, the town would have many of these entries made before we actually complete your audit, and that would alleviate some of this deficiency being reported. I will point out that a large number of our adjusting entries are very common with first time through. This was our first year auditing Deep River, so it is, not unheard of to have a number of adjustments needing to be made. And the hope is that over time we would continue to work with management and kind of all work together and get everybody in terms of how things will be completed and in terms of getting ready for the audit process. So,
If you were to compare two towns of similar size, would you find that same concern, and would you find it ongoing?
I actually, believe it or not, towns in the same size of Deep River do usually rely on, hope that their auditors are going to assist in the process. Again, the financial statements are the responsibility of management, even though we do provide assistance in preparing those financial statements. So a lot of times this deficiency is very common, and it's, usually over time what happens is a closing process kind of evolves, and then it can alleviate itself. But a lot of times it comes down to resources. Sometimes there's just not enough time and enough resources for some of the things to be able to be done, and it's, unfortunately we're required to report that in accordance with our standards. So, but again, it's not necessarily, you're not receiving material weakness. You're getting an unmodified clean opinion overall. So it's just something of note. It's not necessarily something that is going to red flag you, if you will.
No, I guess the only thing I'll add is what's really driving that is more closing entries in terms of the balance sheet. So if you were on the board, you may have more concerns if we had audit adjustments regarding certain transactions that were processed. Again, this really doesn't have anything to do with disbursements being recorded, cash receipts being processed. It's really closing entries regarding receivable balances and cutoff as of year end. And so we did go through a lot of these with management. And the goal is, again, to look at some of the entries that we recorded in connection with this year's audit and just make those entries before we actually come out to do the audit.
Does the fact that we switched auditors the things that you would require? Are they generic across the industry, or are they specific to firms?
No, they're pretty generic.
Should we have learned to do some of these things before you got here?
They're pretty generic, they're not, specific to firms. I mean, I looked at the reporting from the prior year, and it's very similar. The reasons and the types of adjustments are very similar. We had some additional entries to record that were probably outside of normal course because we had a fresh look into some prior period type things. The types of entries that were reported are consistent with what you would have had needed to record in prior years. In terms of the federal single audit, report on compliance on the internal control at the federal award level, you had just under $1 million expended on the total federal dollars. The major program was the water and waste disposal system for rural communities. It was $794,000 expended. That's related to the sewer project. You are receiving an unmodified clean opinion on compliance and no significant deficiency for material weaknesses or noted in terms of compliance. So again, highest level of reporting that you receive on the federal level. And we did spend a lot of time, there was a lot of compliance requirements that we were required to test in accordance with that project. In terms of the state single audit, very similar. Report on compliance on internal control at the state financial assistance level. The town of Deep River had about $2.2 million expended, and $369,000 of that was considered non-exempt. So there's several grants that towns receive every year that the state considers exempt, those being like your excess, your educational cost sharing grants, your ECS, excess costs, those types of things. Those are what they consider non-exempt. So we're not required to test them. They don't issue compliance requirements for those grants because they are formula type-based grants. What they do want us to test is that non-exempt portion, which for Deep River was just shy of $370,000. But the major programs that we looked at were the municipal grants and aid for about $104,000, and the town aid road grant for about $200,000. So we did get a pretty good, decent coverage on those dollars. You received an unmodified clean opinion on compliance and no significant deficiencies. So overall, on all levels of reporting, you are receiving the highest level of reporting. In terms of the financial highlights, the government-wide financial statements, this again is your full accrual basis financial statements, much like you would see in a commercial type industry, full accrual basis, all your assets, all your liabilities. I will say that the governmental world has these other accounts called deferred outflows of resources and deferred inflows of resources, which I like to call assets and liabilities, but not really. It's really just a timing difference in how they want certain things recorded, and Deep Rivers is mainly related to pension liabilities. So it's something that we record in relation to the net pension liability. It's really a non-cash financial reporting transaction, but it's just, sometimes those numbers look large, but it's all part of recognizing that pension. In terms of the highlights, I actually will cover this on the next page. We did have several adjustments to government-wide basis financial statements in terms of what we call prior period or beginning balance adjustments. The first one being the adjustment to record the town's net obligation for other post-employment benefits. That was amounts to about $500,000. In auditing the town of Deep River and making inquiries over at the school, we discovered that there were some other post-employment benefits being offered to those employees that had not been captured in your financial statements prior. We did work with the town to obtain a actuarial valuation for those benefits being provided, and that amount has been quantified in your financial statements. I will tell you that that pension other post-employment liability is a pay-as-you-go basis. It's actually related to what we call benefits being offered to employees who are allowed to stay on the town's health insurance plan, really Board of Ed employees, until a certain point of retirement, and that's recognizing that benefit on a present value today. So it's a pay-as-you-go basis. While it is a large liability, the town is not creating any deficit in its obligation by recording these liabilities. So The second one, adjustment was adjustment to allocate a portion of the town's net pension liability and the related deferrals that I was pointing out, and those deferred inflows and outflows. We adjusted, basically there was some business type activities, some employees that were receiving pension benefits through the sewer fund, that balance attributed to those employees were not recorded in the sewer fund. So we made an adjustment to allocate that to where it belongs. So everything can be captured in the sewer fund. And then we also had an adjustment to report sewer assessments receivable, move it back into the sewer fund. It was actually previously recorded in the general fund. We found that it was the intent to have all the activity related to the sewer recorded in the sewer, so we made some adjustments to reallocate those things to those funds. Increases in current and other assets reflected the increase in sewer assessment receivables overall. We recognized a new assessment related to the Kirtland project, and then also you had some increase in property tax collections a year end, and that actually resulted in a higher property tax receivable and some cash. Capital asset additions totaled $1.2 million, which that was then offset by depreciation of 1.1. Overall long-term debt increased by just under 22,000. 200,000 in general obligation bonds were issued, but then they were offset by scheduled debt repayments. And then as I was mentioning before, including your government-wide liabilities is your net pension liabilities. The first one related to the state teacher's retirement. That's actually an on-behalf payment that's made on behalf of the teachers here in Deep River. That's actually made by the state, about $407,000, but then we recognize the town's portion of that liability as $5.9 million, and that's actually been recorded. And then on the other side of that, there was a small balance related to a couple of employees that were in the Connecticut Municipal Employees Retirement System. That pension liability was about $40,000. And I forgot to mention too, the overall plans are funded by the state. 52% is funded on the state teacher's retirement using a discount rate of 8%, and on the municipal employees, it's 88% funded. And that's just basically looking at what the plan's assets are set aside to pay those benefits.
This number just, I've never seen that first number. I've never seen the state's obligation to that's Deep River teachers, right?
Yeah,
I've never seen that.
So if you were to actually carve out of the whole state teachers retirement plan, the portion that's attributable to Deep River, it's $5.9 million. But that's all paid for by the state, so.
One could hope.
Yeah.
52% would one make you wonder whether that's an accurate statement. Yes.
For
now. I know there's been some discussion at the state level of actually pushing some of those costs down to the municipalities as far as funding a portion of that annual required contribution. And so you're looking at $5.9 million for Deep River, which is a small town, small school district. And it's 52% funded using a discount rate of 8%. So I think the discount rates that you're using on your plans are about 6.25%, which we felt was a very reasonable discount rate. This 8% is probably higher than it should, and if you lower that, it does have an even bigger impact on what the liability is. So it's a significant burden to the state of Connecticut, and it'll be interesting to see how they deal with it going forward. So
Think what it'd be to us.
yeah, so it is not included in your financial statements in terms of your balance sheets. It's a disclosure only item.
Yep.
And it's just there again to show that this is a benefit that the teachers who work for Deep River.
Is this only elementary, or does it also include the
Just
obligation?
elementary.
Okay.
No, it's actually disclosure only for that one. Yep.
Yeah, but it's just the elementary school. The regional school district has its own share.
Which would someday be put down to us under these
Right.
bad conditions, but yes, please go on.
And then your net pension liability for the municipal employees retirement system, or the MERS as we call it, that actually is recorded in your government-wide statements as a liability. And then the OPEB liabilities that I was mentioning to you a minute ago, the unfunded portion as of June 30, 2017 is $466,000. So so that would be the obligation, that is recorded in your financial statements, but, it's a little bit different than your net OPEB liability as we get into the new standard going forward. The net, OPEB liability will approximate that 466,000, but again, the liability is based on those employees that are provided benefit to stay on your health insurance that contribute their premiums 100%. So it's really just what we call an implicit rate, the benefit you're providing that's quantified. So it doesn't provide a further obligation or cash outlay to the town. And again, that's reflected. The unfunded liability is disclosure only versus your net OPEB obligation, about 500,000, which is reported in your financial statement. In terms of your governmental fund financial highlights, this is your fund financial statements. This is has a measurement focus of current resources in versus current resources out, much similar to what you're looking at on a monthly basis when you review your financial reports, similar to your budget basis. Combined ending fund balances as of June 30, 2017 were about 1.5 million, which was an increase of about 38,000 from the prior year. So a total of all your funds combined, they're essentially break even. Your general fund had a fund balance of 959,000, 880,000 of which was considered unassigned, meaning it's available for use at the town's discretion or the board's discretion. Capital project funds, 178,000, but that's actually committed for future capital projects or projects that have been ongoing. And then all your other funds had fund balances combined of 382,000. And these funds are restricted, committed, or assigned for various purposes. And those, are set aside for the fund's purpose that has been assigned to. Unassigned fund balance of the general fund as of June 30, 2017, again totaled 888,000, which represented about 5% of general fund expenditures. This is sufficient to cover approximately just over half a month of general fund operating expenditures. The 5% is actually consistent with what the town of Deep River's fund balance has been in recent history. I will tell you that in Connecticut, nationally the range is usually 5 to 15%. In Connecticut, typically what we recommend is fund balance percentages of about 10%, only because it helps you weather the ups and downs with the reliance that's needed with state financial assistance. The years that we just had, the last year or so, with the uncertain budgetary outlook that was kind of passed down from the state. When you have a lean fund balance, it's a little harder to absorb that. So a lot of towns your size will typically be closer to 10%. But again, I don't see any. You're able to manage your budget process in the last year. Without too much distress. So I would think that your fund balance policy is probably, your fund balance levels are probably okay.
You may not find that too much lack of distress with this board. So anyhow, please consider.
I'm sure it was, probably the wrong word. I'm sure it was very stressful to manage, but I'm not aware that the town is in dire financial condition at this point, is what I was trying to reiterate. So again, just something to think about. Maybe as the years go forward, the town may want to consider a formal fund balance policy that they could implement to try to maintain a higher level of fund balance. Some of our towns actually have done that in the past. So you have specific questions when you get to that
What
point.
form does that take? Because do other towns actually have a policy that has been adopted by the citizens of the town that we budget for and expect
Yes.
citizens to pay to maintain that 10%, something that I'm just making
It's
up
usually
words.
something that's built up over time. A lot of times what's included in a fund balance policy as well is putting funds aside for capital use as well. So it just depends on the outcomes and objective. It takes some time. Usually it takes some time over many years to kind of build up a fund balance. So again, it has to be something the citizens are willing to adopt, because it's basically earmarking surplus for a fund balance versus giving your fund balance back to your taxpayers every year, and without raising your mill rate. So it just depends on how you manage
And
that.
you termed the 880,000 for the fiscal year ending 2017
Yep.
as okay. That was your.
Yeah, so you're at the bottom end of the range. So the national average is 5 to 15%. In Connecticut, we typically like to see towns of your size 10%, only because it helps you manage the uncertainties with the state funding. However, you are still within your acceptable range. So
We often get feedback from folks in town who think that's a high number. 880,000 is high, and it's a big number. At my house, it's a
Right.
big number. At the town level, it's not a huge number.
At the
it's
town
an
level, it's
average.
not a huge number because it's comparing your unassigned fund balance to your annual expenditures. So when you actually compare that, they like to see that percentage to be actually higher than that. Yeah. In terms of your budgetary highlights, your original budget anticipated the use of fund balance amount of $33,000. Your final budget actually included $349,000 in additional appropriations, which was related to $200,000 to fund the new burner boiler system at Deep River Elementary School and $45,000 to purchase a refurbished compactor. However, after your whole budget to actual results for the year, your actual net change in fund balance on a budgetary basis was an increase of $218,000. So you anticipated using $350,000 in fund balance, but you actually was able to have a surplus of $218,000. So you didn't need to use, any of your fund balance. Revenues were about $645,000 more than budgeted, primarily related to favorable property tax collections, and expenditures were $59,000 less than budgeted. So overall, expense management. Does anyone have any questions on any of that before I get to correct communications?
645 is thousands.
Yes. Yep. I meant to have it down, sorry. It's in down.
$640. We did a
$640.
grand- We did a grand job.
Dead on.
That'd be a pretty good budget. In terms of required communications, again, as your auditors, there's a required, as part of closing out our audit, we need to make certain communications to the Board of Finance every year. The first one being the auditor's responsibility under U.S. generally accepted auditing standards. This is basically stating that management is responsible for the preparation of financial statements. So while we do assist in preparing the draft of the financial statements with management, our responsibility is to express an opinion on them, and we do rely on management to be able to accept responsibility for those statements. In terms of plan, scope, and timing of the audit, no changes in the scope of work were performed. We originally had agreed upon filing the audit based on part of our conditions during our auditor engagement process of filing within 60-day extension, but we actually needed an additional 30 days. We filed by March because we needed to obtain the actuarial information for the OPEB. So we did actually, we were completed fieldwork essentially by the end of February like we had planned, but we just had that extra time for financial reporting. So that was a change to the timing. But again, we were in constant communication with OPM, so it wasn't really any of consequence to the town. In terms of significant audit findings, quality aspects of accounting practices, this is basically saying that no new GASB standards have a significant impact on the financial statements were implemented. The disclosures that are included in the note 1 of your financial statements are neutral, consistent, and clear, and consistent with towns of your size and type of disclosures. Accounting estimates are deemed reasonable. Accounting estimates related to allowances on property tax collections and other things such as depreciable lives are consistent with other towns of your size and are deemed to be reasonable. There were no significant difficulties encountered in performing the audit per se, but we did have a number of adjustments that we worked with management to record and adjust the financial statements, and I have the types of entry listed here. We had adjustments related to grant revenues and whether to record grant revenues or deferred grant revenues based on the timing of expenditures at year end. Adjustments to balance trial balances and beginning balances to agree to prior year financial statements. There was a number of entries that were made in the financial statements that need to be made on a beginning balance basis to the books and records of the town. Adjustments to reconcile interfund balances and activities between funds. So adjustments to balance due to due from other funds in the general fund, as well as some transfers in, transfers out. We also had some adjustments to recognize the town's now application for post-employment benefits. We talked about that. Adjustments to agree tax and sewer assessment receivable balance to supporting reports provided by the tax office. And then also the biggest one being we had a lot of adjustments for the sewer fund just to get that on the full accrual basis of accounting. That's actually been pretty consistent with prior years. There's been a number of adjustments that the auditors will make in part of their process. We can see that in the last few years as well. And then we did have one uncorrected misstatement, which we actually referred to as a past adjustment. So we had found that accrued payroll, they should have been in some additional accrued payroll liabilities to be recorded in the amount of about $40,000 in the general fund. However, we passed on that because it was some balances that weren't necessarily budgeted for. So because that was below our threshold, we were able to pass on that. So we did not record that entry. And that entry is really a timing difference. So it all depends on when your payroll ends versus your year end, and sometimes there's some liability to capture based on that overlap of year end, and that fluctuates from year to year based on when June 30th is in relation to your payroll. So we passed on that, and that's very common. Those are the type of entries that we will pass on often. There were no disagreements with management. Management representations, we did ask management to sign off on a management representation letter which accepts their responsibility for the financial statements. Management was willing to sign off on that representation letter. If they were unable to or unwilling to, we'd have to report that to you. And there were no unusual representations that we asked management to sign off on. They were all pretty standard and consistent with other towns. And we're not aware of any management consultations with other independent accountants. Have you been aware of any would be required to report that to you and contact the other accountants to make sure that whatever issue you discuss with them, you give them all the facts to make sure we're not, it's called opinion shopping, make sure it's not occurring, but we're not aware of that. And then other matters, we did have several verbal discussions with management in terms of internal control practices and processes and best practices. And we did that in the course of our audit, many of which I think have been already kind of considered and implemented. And to strengthen processes overall. So overall, I think for first time through audit, it was pretty successful. And typical with what we would see on a first time through audit. So, does anyone have any questions?
What do you see, I'm curious, that is Mary, on a month-to-month basis, we develop a budget which is really a source of use.
Yes.
Assuming cash coming
Yep.
in, cash going out.
Yep.
That's not the financial statements that you take pride in creating.
No. So you're used to seeing your budgetary basis report, or even what we call, your fund financial statements, your resources in, resources out. A lot of the entries that we record are to kind of are the year-end timing balances, mostly related to the balance sheet, making sure those receivables are recorded and liabilities are recorded and that.
So you take our sources and uses and move it into a balance sheet income statement.
Basically moving into the right fiscal year for cutoff, yes.
What do other towns, Board of, and you don't have to know this, do other towns Board of Finance every month look at a balance sheet, income statement? Have you ever
No,
seen that?
no, typically no. Typically they look at, what's
Source
coming
and
in and what's
uses,
going out.
yeah.
Because that's what they need to do, or need to look at on a day-to-day basis or a month-to-month basis. It's really only a year end, you need to report those other. Some towns that are large will recommend that they do a more periodic closing process, whether that's quarterly or semi-annually, just to make sure everything gets captured and not all relying on your end. But I think for a town of Deep River size, to do that process annually is fine.
So I'll just add, a lot of the financial information that you're looking at is more or less on a cash basis. And so a lot of the audit adjustments and where it differs when it gets prepared in the financial statements is bringing it to a modified accrual or accrual basis in accounting. So ideally, even though that's just kind of one small piece of the accounting process, that is something that, you know, hopefully as a town, you can take on that responsibility and, you know, make those entries before, again, we actually come out and do the audit.
I just get confused. I mean,
Yeah.
we should all take great pride in the assets of the town, but,
Right.
and you record them on a balance sheet, but I've been on the board for 18 years and we've never stared at a balance sheet and done much with it. So it always confuses me, but.
Is there anything that we need to do differently so we're not having these end of year, beginning of the year?
We've provided all our entries and trial balances to Kathy. There's a few entries and things that I have to actually follow up with Kathy for some information that her and, you know, Lauren and I will share back and forth just to kind of make sure that, you know, those entries line up to where she needs them to line up to. I'm still actually kind of working with her on a few things. So I would think that, you know, as she gets used to and more comfortable with some of those entries, she'll be able to do that going forward.
And I've carried conversations with her. She is attempting to prepare those things.
Yep, I actually owe her some information right now, so.
She's good.
There were some additional accounts that we created in our audit templates to be able to show balances for financial reporting. And so those are the types of accounts she's going to attempt to get into the GL, the general ledger system. So I need to further clarify some things so she can actually do that. On an auditor side, it's very easy for us to just kind of do that. It's a little more complicated in the GL, so.
Excellent. Any additional questions, folks?
Two basic questions. What do you mean by management?
Management is usually the finance department and the selectmen.
Okay, and another term you used in your report, unmodified clean opinion on compliance. What is an unmodified clean
An
opinion?
unmodified opinion basically means that the opinion that we're issuing is unmodified. It used to be a term that we used unqualified, but the standards actually changed it to be unmodified. So that just means that we're issuing you an opinion that we're not saying except
It's okay,
for,
but you should be
yes,
doing
exactly,
blah, blah, blah.
except for, or the other type of opinion is an adverse opinion, which means that, you know, we can't issue an opinion on this area.
Okay,
So,
thank you.
you're welcome.
Is a term of the art of the industry. And the state will react, I assume, if you do not, correct?
Correct. We need to issue our reports in accordance with the standards. And if
And
we
I
don't-
assume people who have loaned this money will equally react, so,
Mm-hmm.
with an unqualified opinion. so.
Correct.
It depends, you know, there are some instances where there'd be an except for type of opinion, and those reasons for those vary. I mean, yes, it does definitely flag or call attention to the user of a financial statement, but it doesn't necessarily, isn't always negative, but yes, you want it as much as you always really want that unmodified opinion, so.
Thank you, Brent. This is the first time anyone has ever come with a PowerPoint presentation to us. Thank you.
We like to use it. We feel like it does definitely hits on the highlights of the financial statements. There's a lot of information in front of you, different types of reports, and especially to someone that may or may not have seen a full set of financial statements before, it can be very confusing as to what basis of statement you're looking at. So we just like to kind of to do that, so.
It's helpful, it's much easier to follow what you're saying when you're including all.
The governmental financial reporting model is actually confusing to CPAs that, you know, don't work in government. So even for publicly traded companies or privately held companies, if they look at these financial statements, they're confusing. There's a lot of different bases of accounting and that sort of thing. So, and I actually, if you look at an SEC filing for a publicly traded company, it's probably a third of the size of your town financial statement. So a lot of good information in there. Certainly encourage you to read it, and if you have any questions, you can let us know.
Thank you.
Typically, we have a few questions after, so.
Oh, yeah, and if you have any questions, after tonight or anytime, even in between when we're here doing the audit, feel free to let us know.
These folks have been a pleasure to work with. We were struck, Buddy and I both were struck with some of the language that they're required to use and the ominous tone of that language, and they were very quick to explain that it's not as bad as it sounds. It's not bad at all, it just sounds horrible. And we came in knowing that we were gonna be a little behind their regular schedule, and they fit us in, and we very much appreciate the work and the effort.
And next year, we're more in line to have a regular time completion by whatever time
Yeah,
it
I
is,
forget
January.
where we confirmed the timing, but that is our hope and plan, to get you in earlier, so we're not, I know Deep River's been on an extension for various years now, so the goal would be to kind of get you out of that pattern, and going forward, so.
Your current schedule, you're coming in August, aren't you?
We're coming in to do preliminary procedures and some of our interim work in August, yes.
So I think from a timing perspective, the nice thing is we were able to move our schedule around so that Lauren will be returning as the senior on the engagement. She's obviously picked up a lot of knowledge doing the audit this year. I think we're probably towards the end of November, early December in terms of when we're going to come out to do the field work. Typically will take us 2 to 3 weeks, so we'll be very close to that year-end filing deadline. We have towns that we come in December and we get the audit done, get it out by the end of December. So it will really be important just to make sure that, some of these issues that we had previously, are kind of resolved and addressed. So planning for it will be important, but the hope would be that we'll be able to issue on time.
And based on the overall timing it took us when we started in January, we think we will be able to do that. Our biggest snag, we had some additional time it took us because it's the first time through, so that's a little longer. And then also we had the additional time we needed to kind of deal with the information we obtained from the actuary. So those two things right off the bat don't have to happen this year, so that kind of does help streamline our process,
So I just want to go on record, Jennifer's a lot of fun anyway, talking to camera. But is Lauren the one who is really cool? She's got 2 or 3 screens, and she can tell you what the, at the school, what the lunch numbers are. I mean, it's really cool. This is what accountants really are all about.
Not kidding.
People I worked with said I'm a wannabe accountant, so something.
Yes, Laura definitely keeps me in line, so.
Oh my God, the things that give us a job.
All right, folks, thank you very much. We'll do it again, as they say. So, see you soon.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, guys.
While Angus is escorting our guest, let's just look at Tommy. Tommy, who is at the, I think he's at a
Said he was
a meeting.
meeting.
International Rotary. He has given us money. We have, if you look at, let's look at today. What's the amount of money we have? We have on 6/26, no, that's not good.
25th of June and the
2 months.
21st of May.
So I do not have a number as of
Yes, way at the bottom, 6/26.
6/26/17.
Oh,
I happen to know the number is 1.4 million. We have cash in the bank today.
We have a June 25, 18 statement. Do you want a copy of it? Sure.
What's the number I came for, the 25?
25th of June.
Yeah.
25, 21,
Yeah, so
18, 3 million. So what's the total of the bond? I believe this number is useless.
Okay, this is what he's got.
but
I believe you should be looking at farming.
at what?
That is the general fund of the town.
The 1.7.
1.2. Okay, let's do 1.7.
I'm sorry.
That's the amount of money. That is the amount of money the town has to pay its bills. All these other ones are different accounts.
1.7 is, 1.727 is the important one to look at.
That's what, the 21st? I can't quite tell. 25th? Something.
25th of June.
25th, yeah.
25th is what? Anyhow, this is my usual. I get concerned that monies are running short, but we'll make it. We've always made it past them.
Well, we're starting, tax bills are going out
Tomorrow. Thursday.
Thursday.
So yes.
And some people
They
will
will
pay
be-
them in July, and some people will wait till August 1st.
Yeah,
It's
the
correct.
usual.
It's correct.
But there we get the bulk of our funds.
That is correct. So we should be fine. I believe the next item, Laurie, correct me, should be recommendations of selection. Do you have other items that you want to chat about today? Angus, do you want to?
Recommendations of selection, take a couple of days off when the weather's good. It's gonna get hot.
I like that one.
Yeah.
I'm going to second that.
We had a couple of conversations at the Board of Selectmen's meeting regarding a couple of things that we will probably need to go to town meeting for, and one thing that we won't, but it'll be of interest. This was discussed in this report, that $39,000 item in here that didn't match, didn't get to a point that they needed to report it, but was something that they put in this. That's a direct result of payroll, the first payroll of a year actually being to cover the last week of the previous fiscal year. That's been something that's been happening, I think, for quite a long time. Right now, I'll speak to this right now, so our hope is that we can straighten it out and get it so we don't have to deal with it again. But in 2017, the year ended, the pay schedule ended on July 2nd in 2018, which meant that the week prior that we were paying should have been accrued for the previous year, 2017. But it wasn't accounted for in the budget, it wasn't planned for, it wasn't ever accredited. So we didn't spend any more money, but our first check came out of 2018's budget. So we're always pushing ourselves a week behind, because it's not uncommon for a week to end, a pay period to end in the next week or in the next year. So what the Board of Selectmen is suggesting, and I'm confident that Bud agrees with this, is that we go to a special town meeting and we take money from, we should have in our surplus, we'll have enough money to cover that approximately $39,000 or $40,000 to cover the week's pay that will be for 2018, but I don't want to take it out of 2019's budget because we didn't budget for that week. So if we take it out of the surplus that we have for, any surplus we have for last year, for this right now fiscal year, we should be able to zero that out so that in future years, we will not have to, number one, it won't be reported, whether it's 39,000 not enough to worry about or not. It's something I feel we should be at. We should start the year at zero, not at negative 39,000.
Which is what has been happening.
Every year.
It's been pushed
Oh, yeah,
every
every
year
year.
to the next year.
Yep, exactly.
And we're trying to get it back into reasonable balance, shall we say.
Yeah, I mean, nobody's getting paid anymore. It's just getting it in the proper.
It's like
proper
on a
budget.
month where if you got paid every Thursday, some months you would get 5 days.
Yep, oh, that's right, yep. And in a couple of years, we will have a 27 pay periods, because the year, somehow or another, the year expands. I don't know how that happens, but it's what happens occasionally I think every 12 years, it was explained to me, that's what happens, and we'll have that this year, or in a couple of years. But this is, so we're recommending that you guys move that to town meeting.
I don't think it has to go to a town meeting. Here's my rule, and you will then.
Good.
Here's what, my rule is we are allowed to move monies to a line item once. If we move to a line item twice, we have to go to town meeting.
Okay.
So we would not be moving it twice.
There you go.
Item two, if we move to a line item greater than 10,000, we have to go to town meeting. But since we've got so many.
That's right, these are individuals,
These are
none of which are greater than
individuals, so,
10,000, yeah.
So I think we just nod.
Excellent.
And when we get into that period, which we do in August or September, well, I guess we do September, October, where we reconcile
Yep.
those that are over and under, this will just be one of the items we deal with. So.
Excellent. Then I'll take care of that, and
And
we'll,
so I guess the nods that I'm encouraging people, I don't think Laurie will be our keeper, Robert's rule. I don't think we have to vote or do a resolution authorizing Angus to overexpend the salary line items. I just think we nod and accept that that's what's going to happen. So it's not being done clandestinely, we're aware of it.
yeah.
You mark it in the minutes if
It
anyone
is
wants
being
to see.
marked in the minutes that all the lines are being adjusted. to
Well, we're not
the proper
spending any
fiscal
more money.
year. We're not spending any
Not
more
spending
money.
any.
It's not in the fiscal year. You're just
Put it-
moving
put it-
from.
Well, hold on, let's be careful now.
I
When you
know.
say we're not spending any more money, when you add up the budget at the end of the year, there will be $40,000 more
That's right.
spent.
There will be $40,000 more spent in 2017-18
Correct.
than there was, because it wasn't budgeted for. But no one is being paid more money.
That's
Is
correct.
the
But
best way to say
otherwise,
it.
next year would have another $40,000 we'd have
Right.
to deal with.
They could have solved it if they had made, when they found it, corrected it
Yep.
last year, but
That's
they
right.
didn't.
And if we corrected it in
Could have been the
2016,
year
and
before that, the year before
2015,
that,
and
correct.
2014,
Yeah.
because this is.
And by the way, we could do the same thing.
Otherwise, it just keeps going.
Keep tossing it on. It
Yeah,
just seems,
absolutely
let's
could.
deal with it, get it out of the way.
Okay.
But at the end of the year, people who pick up the budget will see that each person got paid a little bit more than what we say that was supposed to be budgeted.
Yeah. Okay, the next item that I do think will need to go to a town meeting is the municipal aid. And this speaks, there's a long conversation that goes around this, but we did in fact receive all of our town aid road money and all of our municipal aid money, which is money that is dedicated to roads. So in the last 2 weeks, we've received another $200,000 that we can spend on roads. For one reason or another, we did not include municipal aid money in our budget. So we don't have the authorization to spend it. I think we need to go to the town meeting to,
Can I compliment her? We didn't think it was coming,
We didn't
so
think
why
it was
is
coming.
it budgeted?
yep, there was no reason to think it was coming. It was zeroed out in the governor's budget. It got put back in after we prepared the budget. And it came in the last week of the fiscal year. So, but we got it, and we're gonna spend it. We're spending it right now. Well, not quite, but we're making arrangements to spend it right now.
If we were going to put it in our budget, if the state had put the money in the budget and we put it in our budget, we would have to have a plan to spend it on this road or this road project. We can't just say we're not taking it in to change the curtains here.
No, we have to,
I mean, it
we
has
have
to go to a
to
specific
certify to
project.
them that this will be
Yeah.
used on roads.
Yeah.
We can ask for a waiver, but we have no idea whether that's gonna happen. I didn't wanna complicate this at all. We need it for the roads, we use it for the
And there's
roads.
plenty of roads to use it on.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. So, I think, again, we're recommending that we go to a town meeting to do that. Not only for this year, in retrospect, I guess, I don't know. Retroactively for 2017-18, but also, we don't have it in 2018-19's budget. And rather than it's kind of like town aid road, whether, I think we should put it in the budget. It's in the legislature has said they're going to give it to us. I think we should plan for it. And if we get it, we get it. If we don't get it, we won't get it. The bigger part of that story is a good thing is that we've gotten everything that the state ultimately told us they were going to give us. With these two grants, that brings us to what they told us that we were going to get. So
Did you fall off your chair?
But I owed people a couple of drinks because I didn't expect it. Her husband was one of them. But,
Christmas came in June.
yeah.
Surprise.
And that's a good thing. That's a positive thing for the town. I don't think we can count on this being any better of a year. I think this budget was put together, the 18-19 budget was put together by the state for an election year. I think we're gonna see there is tremendous debt that needs to be addressed. And I can only expect that some of that I know that it's eventually gonna come down on the towns. It's just a matter of how long.
Once the elections are over in
Yeah.
November,
Yep.
nothing changes.
Yep, and the governor vetoed any attempts by the legislature to restrict the governor's ability to change the budget numbers. And that did not, and override of that did not happen, so.
So you need from us to make a motion to go to town meeting to spend the money on the roads.
Yep, to spend the municipal aid grant, both in 17-18 budget and in the 18-19 budget. Or just add the line to the 18-19 budget.
And you can only spend it on the roads.
Only on the roads, it can't go to anything else. And if
And
we
if
don't
it-
spend it on roads, it goes back to the state.
If it's been given to us by the state to spend on the roads, why does it have to go to the town to authorize us to spend the money that's been given to us
Because
by
it's
the?
not a budgeted expenditure.
You know how we
Okay, so we
budget
don't have a
town,
line
town
item,
road
okay.
aids,
Right.
where we map what the
Yeah.
state promises? I suggest we create another line item with the
Yeah.
exact
Mhm.
same.
When are you planning to spend it?
When?
Yeah.
I've actually already arranged for the crews to get out there,
Yeah.
so it'll be spent
I
in
mean,
July. As soon as we get this meeting scheduled
Okay. So
and get authorization, it'll be
I'm just
spent.
thinking, lump it all in one.
Well, we don't have the 18-19 104,000 yet, we have the 17-18.
I don't want to discuss before we get there, but I suggest that we take care of 18-19 later on, when we get it, but that's just.
It could be the same thing, we could be doing the same thing again, and that's the only reason I suggested we add it now.
Well, I don't mind adding the line and everything, but we don't know whether we're gonna get the money in that budget,
Yeah,
that fiscal year coming up.
It just seemed to be economies of conversation. We would be adjusting the budget year we're in
Right.
and next year's, creating the same line and funding at the same promised dollar amount. Just thought there was economies of conversation. I mean, if you don't get it, you don't spend it.
yeah. And also not having to go through this process. If we get it again at the end of the year, I can't really arrange to have the money spent. It'll be spent in the next fiscal year, it just gets a little goofy, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, timing's tough when we give it to you in the last,
We
week of
really
the financial
really
fiscal
appreciate
year,
it.
right? It's kind of crazy.
And if I had confidence, maybe I would have made arrangements to get the roads done, but,
There's a darned if you do and darned if you
Yeah.
don't situation.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we want
Make
this,
plans for you once we've gotten money.
Of course.
you
So
know,
we need
I-
a motion
I've been
to
in
put a
business-
line item
been in business
in the
for
budget.
We need a motion to send to town meeting a request to create a line item both in the revenue and the expenditure side. We didn't recognize it for revenues either.
but is this also going to be a carry forward to be expended in the next fiscal year?
No.
You're
I say
gonna get
no.
all of
At
it?
one time, I told you that's what I wanted, and I based that on a nod that I got from Angus. Based on conversations today, Angus had an excellent point. State gave it to us in this fiscal year.
to spend.
We should show that we're going to spend it in
This
this fiscal year.
We got 4 days.
I kinda think
It
we
gets a
have,
little silly when you start putting calendars together, because the public meeting will be at the end of July, adjusting this budget year.
but I think we have to, just because OPM will be all over us, as, you know, this was this year's money, it should be spent in this year.
So are you going to be able to spend it in the next 4 days?
No.
I can,
No,
No, I can't.
There's plenty of things that we yet to incur that will be put into this fiscal year,
Right.
and the auditors will recognize as expended, such as what we're talking about here. We always have carryover monies and that type of thing, so yes,
So can I just make the motion by
Please.
saying I make the motion?
please make the motion.
Because I
Oh,
like what.
thank
you just
you.
said
You have to
motion.
word it.
All right.
Thank you, I get to word this one, okay. Expect a text later.
If you took down everything that
I've
Bud
been
said,
playing with it, yeah, but,
I like
Well, that's right, you have to
Okay.
put this out there. I
Yeah,
was
I
thinking we
have
had
to-
time to think about that.
no,
So-
I have to put this out
We'll
there.
send to a town meeting, which Angus has got sometime in
I've got
August.
that.
So you have to
I
make the
mean,
motion, it has
including-
to be seconded.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
I need a
that's correct.
second, yeah.
Yes. So Russ has made the motion that Laurie will write. Would anyone care to second that so we can discuss it and vote on it?
Second.
Thank you.
Second. Does anyone wish to discuss it in more detail? All right. So hearing no discussion, all those in favor of sending this resolution to town meeting, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. All those opposed? Thank you.
We'll schedule that for as soon as we can, but based on publication, notification and stuff like that, it'll be no sooner than the 17th. Probably be the following week at our regular next meeting, just prior to this meeting. That just saves us some publication money. You know, if we go into the local paper, which I think gets read by more people, it's also less expensive, but it adds about 8 or 10 days to the process.
You shouldn't be in a hurry at this point, because it's late.
No, I'm in a hurry. We've got a lot to do, and I want to get as much done as I can.
Right.
But
But I mean, there's no.
I think I can commit to doing the work. They can't schedule it yet anyway, so we'll schedule it for, I think, about the same time as the meeting, so. If for some reason it doesn't move forward, which I can't imagine not wanting to improve the roads with free money, so. Okay, only other thing that I have to talk, and thank you for that. The only other thing I have to talk about is just news, really, that the elementary school, I think we've all been talking about and paying attention to the fact that the elementary school got hit with a $85,000 additional cost because of a special ed student that came in. That put them in a pretty big spending conundrum. They worked that down to about $20-something thousand, $26,000. Then we got discovered that we had gas, the gas company had not been reading the meter properly, so they added another $16,000 of gas expense to the elementary school, which put them at about a $40,000 hole about a month ago. The other day I contacted Ruth and the school to see, knowing that this meeting was coming up, if they were going to be coming to ask for money. I thought it would be appropriate to let us know as soon as we could. Ruth informed me that they had been through all kinds of austerity. Were able to come in at zero, at an even Steven budget. So, the final numbers aren't in yet, but I think we're okay. We're not going to have to find money for the elementary school.
That's amazing work. And Christian over there obviously have a big hand in that.
Oh, yeah.
Principal, and
Yeah.
That's amazing work.
Yeah.
What I'd like to see is that same sort of economy applied at the supervision and the regional. Because if we can do it here in a small setting, why can't they do that up there?
No, it leads to all kinds of questions. But just like Russ just said, my first response to Ruth was, please express to all of the teachers that did without and to Pete Waz who did without and all of that kind of thing, that we appreciate it.
Thank you.
Well, what did they do without? What did they really do?
I haven't gotten those details yet, and as we do, and that conversation will continue because we live in a time when we should be tightening our belts and
I mean, we need to.
We
The
do.
kids need to learn how to read, how to write. They're the 3 R's, reading, writing, and arithmetic. And we can do that on a piece of paper with a pencil. Yes, we need computers. Yes, we need them in the libraries so the kids can do research, but we don't need them in every single freaking classroom. I'm
For
sorry.
every
I
single
didn't want to get into
For
that.
every single kid. I know
I'm
we're
not
going
gonna
down
get
a
into
path
that.
here, but
And another really great thing is if meter readers could read the meter.
That apparently was not just in Deep River, that was.
Think of a school that should have spent more money for the reader.
Right.
holy cow.
All right, excellent.
So that's it from us.
Okay, so that was 16,000 for the gas?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, well, I'm going to follow up on Angus's comments. Okay, what you had before me, what we have before
I think they were
you
good.
is And I've taken off the accounting system that we have here, so that's why you got a note at the bottom, I have no idea what it means. On the far left-hand side, you'll see a category, you'll recognize them, hopefully. These are the dollars we assumed in the current budget we're still in. And you will see the dollar amounts that we have actually received. In the budget, we assumed $1.78 million. We actually received $1.83, which we have received $48,000 more than what we assumed in our budget when we prepared it and went to the town in May. All right?
Oh, great.
Now,
May of 2017,
yes, correct.
more than a year ago.
Correct. More, and this is the number that was in the what we took to the town the other day. Now, I just want to offer that this is good. We should celebrate this. And I wish to remind each of you, in case you haven't, I was the one who constantly said the state of Connecticut would not, or encouraged you to be resistant the state of Connecticut would live up to their obligations. They have. I don't know if I've learned anything from that. I'm still resistant they will do it in the future, but these will be conversations we have ongoing. But I do deserve to say to you that they lived up, and I did not always think they would. So
I think
Well-
that was, we encouraged
Yeah.
them.
But there were other outside, I mean, if you read the Connecticut Mirror, even now, they're currently saying that next year's budget, there are going to be changes in this current, or in the current budget that
We
we're
will
in.
have the exact same conversations.
Yeah.
And what is even more mysterious, we will have a whole new group of people sitting
Yeah,
up there.
tons
making
of new
decisions.
people.
So,
Yeah.
I think it's surprising that the money actually came in all honesty.
Very
That last
surprised.
bit, I mean,
as was I.
Pretty
They
surprising.
lived up to their obligations, but
good, but surprising.
what, I think we're doing the prudent thing by putting money aside to handle the uncertainty. But it is not without some awareness that we ask people to take money out of their pocket, so. I don't know what to do with that, so. All right.
Well, I think it's important to note that we were not asking people to pay for an increase to the unreserved fund. But we were also not asking people to count on, we were asking people to not really expect that we're going to get this money. We didn't budget enough to cover if we didn't get it, but we didn't over budget so that now we've got, $400,000 to fiddle around with, because, I think that we put a budget together that kind of met a middle ground, that we could be prepared if we needed to be, and we could benefit and get ourselves up. That 5% is pretty darn low. You think about it, you could handle.
We weren't even 5%.
No, we were at 2%,
Exactly.
and we heard from people that think that's the right way to go, but, at 5%, we can handle 2 weeks.
That's correct.
And they want us to be at 10%?
Yeah. No, the
Yeah.
state wants us to be at 12 to 15.
Yeah. But if you think about your household, like they're saying, economy of, your household, they say put aside 2 to 3 months of all your expenses.
And what was their figure we have put aside for
2
0.6?
weeks.
Yeah,
Yeah,
a little over
2
2 weeks.
Just over 2 weeks. Versus being able to pay your mortgage and your utilities and everything else for 2 to 3 months. Town can't do that.
So we will face this again.
Oh.
Do we have anything else to discuss?
Wait a minute, was that it? The fire department. Do we have any news on the pursuing the fire department, the truck?
The grant is, they don't really start to do anything on that until the end of the summer. I've worked with Scott Bowden as the chairman of the Board of Fire Commissioners. He and I have exchanged information as far as either hiring a grant writer or you who works specifically on fire apparatus grants, or using a fellow that we've used for a number of grants over a number of years to work with him. And I'm really we are just getting started on trying to get any preliminary information that we can together.
And you're gonna keep tapping Lieberman and
Oh, yeah,
the speed
yeah,
to
oh,
the
yeah.
fire to live up to
Well, I
his
don't think
promise?
Joe can do much for us anymore, but Joe Courtney
Lieberman
certainly
or
can.
Courtney, whatever, I don't know. One of the Joes.
Joe Lieberman retired.
Frankly,
Joes.
we had a resident who just attended the budget meeting, a new resident who's only been in town for about a year. But he wrote a letter to Bill Gates, he wrote him 3 letters, asking him if he would fund our fire trucks.
Nice.
And he did hear back from one, so, so.
You never know.
You never know.
You know that-
If you don't ask, you're not gonna get it, right?
That's nothing ventured, nothing gained.
That's right.
So if you don't
I
ask,
thought that was
you
very,
don't get.
that's nice to have a new resident who's thinking like that. So.
Yeah, yeah.
Wow.
I have a question that might require a little follow-up. It's in the,
Okay.
it's in the report they gave us, the bigger,
Well,
basic financial
Yeah.
statements. I was just
Yep.
leafing through quick, page 49.
Yep.
It's the volunteer firefighters retirement plan.
Yep.
The last
I have no
sentence.
idea. Came in.
A monthly retirement benefit to be provided for an original participant who elects the original benefit shall be equal to $15 per month of credited service, up to a maximum of 20 years. If I do the math quick, it comes out to be $3,600 a month.
That's not accurate.
I didn't think so. That was,
I would follow up with that.
that was
Thank
my
you.
question. I just wanted to.
More like $15.
It is 36, the max 36 a year.
36 a year.
Remember, Tim corrected me at the beginning, it's 300, maximum 300 a
I don't think
month.
that sentence is accurate.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's right. I appreciate you pointing it
I
out.
just wanted
Yeah.
to note that, because
Very
good
that'll
job.
get a big liability coming.
Oh, yeah.
Gonna be 6 new firefighters.
I'm joking.
Yeah, I'll tell you what.
And he's still taking firefighters.
Is that it? Was there something else?
No,
Okay.
that was,
Thanks.
for now. Yeah.
Yep, thank you.
All right, folks.
Okay.
Any other business?
Motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn, a second?
Second.
Second, any discussion? If not, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
Thanks,
Thank
bud.
you, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.